One of the reasons that our technology is impeded and prevented from feeding the world properly is the failure of one of our networks. It's an information network, and it's called money, about which we have the most unbelievable superstitions and psychological blocks, which have been gone into at some length by Freud, who equates our valuation of money with our attitude to excrement, and a very complicated lot of complexes grow up around that. But money and our psychological attitude to money is a major obstacle to a proper development of technology, enabling it to do what it is supposed to do, that is, to save labor and to produce goods, services, and so on adequately. So I must introduce this with a story which is entirely legendary, indeed quite apocryphal. The great banks of the world at one time got absolutely sick of the expense and security measures involved in shipping consignments of gold from one bank to another. And so they decided that all the chief banks of the world would open offices on a certain island in the South Pacific, which was balmy and comfortable. And there they would store all the gold in the world. And they put it in great subterranean vaults reached by deep elevator shafts. And then all they had to do when one bank or one country owed gold to another was to trundle it across the street. And this was very efficient. And it went on beautifully for 5 or 6 years. And then the presidents of the world banks got together and said, let's have a convention out on this island and take our wives and families. So about 7 years from the date of opening, all those presidents and their wives and families went out to this Pacific island, and they inspected the books, and everything was beautifully in order. Then the children said, oh, Daddy, can't we see the gold? They said, of course you may see the gold. And they said to the managers, let's take our children down to the vaults and show them the gold. And the managers said, well, it's a little bit inconvenient at this time, and perhaps the children would not really be very interested. After all, it's just only old plain gold. And the president said, oh, no, come now. They'd be thrilled. Let's go down and see. And there was further humming and hawing and delays. And finally it came out that a few years before there had been a catastrophic subterranean earthquake. And all the vaults had been swallowed up and all the gold had disappeared. But so far as the bookkeeping was concerned, everything was in perfect order. What this means then is that money is nothing but bookkeeping. It is figures. It is a way of measuring what you owe the community and what the community owes you.
Only water, it's only fire, it's only love. It's only slaughter, we're only liars, it's only blood. They're only thoughts that I'm having so safe within my head. You're only crying, you're only dying,
living organism, of which I am only a tiny part.
Only water, it's only fire, it's only love. It's only slaughter, we're only liars, it's only blood. There are only thoughts that I'm having so safe within my head. You're only crying, you're only dying.
You're wondering how things tied in from the past to the present, even from ancient times. And when you even go into the Egyptian writings, you find the priesthoods understood human nature incredibly well. They understood the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and they knew fantasy and they knew dreams and nightmares. And they knew the effects of nightmares on people, how you remember the nightmares, they stick in your memory. when you went through tremendous times of famine or war or so on, you'd have more and more nightmares, and the public would panic, and then the priest could move in and give them a form of control by giving them or reinforcing their religion. So religion has always been tied up incredibly with methods of controlling the mind. And the psychopathic personality who lives on ego, they understand these things intuitively with other people. They understand the natures of other people very, very well. And they do get to prominent positions of leadership. They crave power. And often the followers of these people, in fact, all they see is the leadership qualities. They don't realize the person that's really beneath that. We've found that down throughout history, where people have had revolutions to find out that the leader becomes a worse character than the guy they just kicked out.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
That is the land of unconfirmed reports. Yes, we came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, oh, I'm sure it did.
Power marries power. And up until recently, and I think it's still done, to be honest with you, genealogists pick the mates for these characters, and they're looking for certain traits in them. Again, going back to Plato, Plato talked on how the aristocracy of his day were picked, and priests mated them up for specific qualities. And he goes into this in his own book when he talks about how he could breed the common people the same way, not for IQ traits or anything else, but for physical traits, for the work that they would have to do. Tall people for certain tasks, short people for others. And he said we can breed traits in or out just like we can with domesticated animals. So they knew this back then, thousands of years ago. And this knowledge was never lost. We forget that most of the elite were the only ones who were given any education up until the 20th century. And the better schools, as they called them in Europe and in the US, they were given classical training. They were taught the histories going all the way back to ancient Greece, to Rome and Greece, and even some of the Egyptian structure as well. And so they were taught these methods, and it's primarily to do with control over the general public and how to create a culture for that public so that they'd never ever question it. They take it all for granted, which the public always do. See?
To better understand the current state of modern-day media manipulation, we must first look at the father of propaganda, Edward Bernays. His influence on the 20th century rivaled that of his uncles, Sigmund Freud, as Bernays pioneered the idea of crowd psychology with Freud's psychoanalytical ideas in what would become a new political ideal on how to control the masses. In his 1928 book, Propaganda, Bernays wrote, "If we understand the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it." He called it the engineering of consent and proposed that those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. It was Bernays who introduced the corporate giants to crowd psychology methods and polished techniques to manipulate society. He convinced the population to buy on impulse things they didn't even need by linking mass-produced goods to their own unconscious desires. The tobacco industry hired Bernays to persuade women to take up smoking, and the Alcoa Aluminum Company asked him to drive the campaign for the national fluoridation of our water supply. A consumerist culture was born, and the U.S. government took notice. In addition to famous corporate giants, Bernays also began working for the federal government. They adopted his technique of manufacturing ever-present dangers and then maintaining a constant state of fear to give those in power greater control of what Bernays called the mass mind.
Edward Bernays, who's the father of modern advertising and propaganda, he literally wrote the book Propaganda. Joseph Goebbels, on record, the Nazi propaganda minister, used a lot of his information and twisted it to his own designs. Bernays was the chief psychological warfare expert for more than 20 years, advising the Department of War. He advised them to call it defense. Don't be honest anymore. Call it the Department of Defense, because you're actually going to run giant imperial slaughter operations.
not doing it will be catastrophic. We'll have 8 degrees, we'll be 8 degrees hotter in 10, not 10, but in 30 or 40 years, and basically none of the crops will grow. Most of the people will have died, and the rest of us will be cannibals. Civilization will have broken down. What the few people who are left will be living in a failed state like Somalia or Sudan, and living conditions will be intolerable. The droughts will be so bad there'll be no more corn growing. Not doing it is suicide. Just like dropping bombs on each other, nuclear weapons is suicide. So we've got to stop doing the two suicidal things, which are hanging on to our nuclear weapons
and global
and then after that we've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
When you open up a can, you may not notice the lining inside, but believe it or not, that lining may contain a synthetic estrogen. That's right, a sex hormone, and it's in almost every single can we consume. As part of a Fox 5 investigation, we decided to have some of the cans of food you eat every day tested, and wait until you see the results.
This could be your table any day of the week. A delicious plate of pasta, topped with tomato sauce, some hearty soup, a tuna fish sandwich, a side of green peas. Food that millions of Americans consume daily. But wait until you see what could be inside your food.
This is a chemical that the people who put it into plastic were insane.
His name is Dr. Fred Vom Saal. He's a professor of biology at the University of Missouri. You may not know his name, but you probably know his work. He recently created a huge uproar within the scientific community after releasing a study on plastic baby bottles and the controversial chemical many of these bottles are made with, called bisphenol A.
This is a chemical that in 1936 was considered for use as an estrogen drug. Then in the 1950s, some tricky chemists found that they could link this chemical together and it creates a hard, clear, glass-like plastic.
And this glass-like plastic is sprayed into cans we buy every day.
The only problem with that is the plastic is then made from a sex hormone.
And it's virtually in every can of food we consume. And according to Dr. Vom Saal, bisphenol A is a big problem because he says it leaches into the foods we eat.
And when you heat this plastic or put tomato sauce in it, the acid degrades the plastic, and then the food that's in there is full of this sex hormone.
Dr. Vom Saal says they have tested bisphenol A in animals, and the results are disturbing.
We started testing it at levels tens of thousands of times below what anybody had ever tested before, and found that it profoundly damaged the male reproductive system. Now we know it causes brain damage, and it causes breast cancer and prostate cancer.
So we decided to do our own tests of common foods we eat every day. We went to different grocery stores and purchased tomato sauces, soups, peas, tuna fish, as well as plastic containers and food wraps. We then sent them all to Dr. Von Saal's lab in Missouri for testing.
The food was removed from the cans. The cans were all cleaned, washed multiple times with water, allowed to dry, and then we put ultra-pure water in the cans to determine how stable the lining of the can was when just faced with water being in contact with it for 24 hours.
The results were concerning.
Every single product here put out an amount of bisphenol A that would be in the danger zone.
The highest levels measured in micrograms were found in cans of Hunt's tomato sauce, followed by Red Pack, Del Monte peas, the Starkist tuna, and the Rubbermaid plastic container.
This is a chemical that can alter the way your cells function at below a trillionth of a gram. 1 million times lower than this.
And he says if the research on animals doesn't concern you, this will. Dr. Vom Saal says when he places bisphenol A leached water into a test tube with breast cancer cells, the cancer cells multiply rapidly.
These amounts would massively stimulate these cells.
Bisphenol A is big business here in the United States. It is estimated that the chemical companies produce 7 billion pounds of it a year, and it's making its way into our bodies. According to the CDC, 95% of Americans have detectable levels of bisphenol A in their urine.
Dr. Vom Saal says the worst thing anyone can do is microwave food in a plastic container covered in plastic wrap.
Stop doing that immediately. The hotter a product becomes, the greater the amount of bisphenol A that will come out of it.